There is a plant so small you could hold 1,000 of them in your palm. It floats on water. It needs no soil. It needs no fertilizer. In fact, it makes fertilizer out of nothing but air. For 4,000 years, farmers in Asia knew this secret. They grew rice in paddies covered with this tiny green fern. They never bought fertilizer. They never depleted their soil. They harvested the same fields, generation after generation, century after century, and the land never stopped giving. Then the chemical companies arrived. Within 50 years, this plant was erased from agricultural memory, replaced by synthetic nitrogen made from fossil fuels. Farmers who once grew food for free now paid for every harvest. Soil that once regenerated itself began to die, and the little fern that could have fed the world without destroying it was forgotten. Tonight, we open the vault on Azolla, the plant that makes its own fertilizer, the organism that once changed the climate of the entire Earth, and the secret that chemical companies spent decades making sure you would never learn. Welcome back to Shock Slice. If you are new here, this is where we uncover the things that were buried, the foods, the plants, the methods that once sustained civilizations and then vanished from memory. Not because they stopped working, but because someone else wanted to sell you the replacement. Tonight we are not talking about a food, we are talking about something more fundamental. We are talking about how plants eat. Every plant needs nitrogen. It is one of the essential building blocks of life. Without nitrogen, plants cannot make proteins. They cannot grow leaves. They cannot produce the food that feeds every animal on Earth, including us. The air around us is 78% nitrogen. It is everywhere, but plants cannot use it directly. The nitrogen in air is locked in a form that plants cannot absorb. It just floats past them, useless. For most of agricultural history, farmers solved this problem in simple ways. They rotated crops. They planted legumes that could work with bacteria to capture nitrogen. They let fields rest. They added manure. They worked with nature's cycles to keep soil fertile. Then, in the early 20th century, 2 German scientists discovered how to pull nitrogen from the air using extreme heat and pressure. The Haber-Bosch process. It required massive amounts of energy. It required fossil fuels, but it could produce synthetic nitrogen fertilizer at industrial scale. This changed everything. Suddenly, farmers could pour concentrated nitrogen onto their fields. Yields exploded, the Green Revolution followed. The population of Earth tripled in a century, fed by crops grown with synthetic fertilizer. But there was a cost. The process that makes synthetic nitrogen is one of the most energy-intensive industrial activities on Earth. It consumes between 1 and 2% of all global energy. It produces roughly 1.5% of all carbon dioxide emissions. Every bag of fertilizer carries a hidden footprint of fossil fuel, and when that fertilizer hits the soil, the problems multiply. Plants cannot absorb all of it. The excess washes into rivers. It flows to the ocean. It creates dead zones where nothing can live. The Gulf of Mexico has a dead zone the size of New Jersey, fed by fertilizer runoff from American farms. Meanwhile, the soil itself suffers. When farmers add synthetic nitrogen year after year, the natural systems that once cycled nutrients begin to shut down. The microorganisms that built fertility disappear. The soil becomes dependent on the chemical input. It becomes an addict, unable to function without the next fix. This is the system we built. This is what we call modern agriculture. But there was always another way. Azolla is a fern, not a flowering plant, not a legume, a tiny aquatic fern that floats on the surface of still water. It looks like green velvet. It looks like something you would clean off a neglected pond. But inside this tiny plant lives something extraordinary. Azolla has a partner, a cyanobacterium called anabaena that lives inside its leaves. This bacterium can do what almost no other organism can do. It can take nitrogen directly from the air and convert it into a form that plants can use. This is called nitrogen fixation. It is one of the most important chemical processes in nature, and Azolla does it faster than almost anything else alive. Under good conditions, Azolla can double its biomass in 2 to 3 days. It can produce 1 ton of organic matter per acre per week, and all of that organic matter is rich in nitrogen that Azolla pulled from thin air. When Azolla dies or is tilled into soil, it releases that nitrogen. It becomes fertilizer, free fertilizer, made from air and water and sunlight. No factory, no fossil fuels, no purchase required. Farmers in China and Vietnam understood this thousands of years ago. They grew rice in flooded paddies. They introduced Azolla to the water. The fern covered the surface, blocking weeds, cooling the water, sheltering fish. And all the while, it was pulling nitrogen from the atmosphere and feeding it to the rice below. When the rice was ready to harvest, the Azolla was tilled into the mud. It decomposed and released its nutrients. The next crop grew stronger because of it. This system worked for 40 centuries. Chinese farmers maintained fertile soil for 4,000 years without synthetic inputs. Western scientists who visited in the early 20th century were astonished. They wrote books about it. They called it a miracle of sustainable agriculture. And then they ignored it. The chemical fertilizer industry was growing. There was money to be made selling inputs to farmers. There was no money in teaching farmers to grow a free fern that would do the same job. So the knowledge was not spread. The research was not funded. The agricultural extension programs that taught farmers how to modernize did not mention Azolla. They mentioned products. They mentioned purchases. They mentioned the chemicals that companies wanted to sell. Within a few decades, even Asian farmers began to abandon Azolla. Synthetic fertilizer was easier. It came in bags. It did not require managing a living organism. It did not require knowledge passed down through generations. The fern that had sustained civilizations became a curiosity, a footnote in agricultural textbooks, something that old farmers remembered, but young farmers never learned. Meanwhile, the consequences of synthetic fertilizer grew worse year by year. Soil degradation is now one of the most serious environmental crises on Earth. The United Nations estimates that 1/3 of global soil is already degraded. Topsoil is being lost 10 to 40 times faster than it can be replaced. At current rates, many agricultural regions have only 60 harvests left before their soil is effectively dead. And still, we pour more synthetic nitrogen onto dying land, hoping chemistry can solve what chemistry caused. But Azolla is still here. It did not go extinct. It was not eradicated. It simply fell out of fashion. It still grows in ponds and wetlands around the world. It still fixes nitrogen at extraordinary rates. It still offers an alternative to the industrial system that is failing. And some people are beginning to remember. Researchers at universities are studying Azolla again. Small-scale farmers are experimenting with it. Permaculture practitioners are incorporating it into their designs. The knowledge that was nearly lost is being rediscovered, one small project at a time. But the scale is tiny compared to what it could be. The funding is minimal compared to what flows to chemical agriculture. The attention is almost non-existent compared to the crisis we face. And here is perhaps the strangest part of the story. Azolla once changed the entire planet 49 million years ago. The Arctic Ocean was a very different place. It was warm. It was isolated. And it was covered, shore to shore, with Azolla. The fern grew explosively, pulling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and sinking to the bottom when it died. For roughly 800,000 years, Azolla bloomed and died and accumulated. It drew down so much carbon that it helped trigger a global cooling event. The Earth shifted from a greenhouse state to an icehouse state. The Antarctic ice sheet began to form. Scientists call this the Azolla event. A tiny fern, smaller than your fingernail, changed the climate of the entire planet. And today, as we pump carbon into the atmosphere and watch temperatures rise, we have mostly forgotten that this organism exists. Azolla can grow on wastewater. It can grow on agricultural runoff. It can grow on the polluted water that flows from our cities and farms. And as it grows, it captures carbon and nitrogen simultaneously. It cleans water while building fertility. This is not theoretical. This is not speculation. This is what Azolla does, what it has always done, what it would do today if we let it. But there is no profit in letting it. No company can patent a fern that has existed for millions of years. No corporation can monopolize something that doubles itself every 3 days and grows anywhere there is still water. No industry can build itself around a product that farmers can produce for free. So the research remains underfunded. The knowledge remains obscure. The solution floats on ponds around the world while we pour money into factories that poison the soil and warm the planet. If you have water, you can grow Azolla. A small pond, a container, a bucket. Anywhere with still water and sunlight, Azolla can thrive. It needs no soil. It needs minimal nutrients to start. Once established, it manages itself. You can harvest it and compost it. You can feed it to chickens or fish. You can till it directly into garden beds. Each handful contains nitrogen that would otherwise require fossil fuels to produce. This is not a complete replacement for modern agriculture. This is not a magic solution that will fix everything overnight. But it is a piece of the puzzle that we have been missing. A piece that was hidden from us not because it did not work, but because it worked too well, too cheaply, too freely. The chemical fertilizer industry is worth over $200 billion per year. That money depends on farmers buying what Azolla makes for free. That money depends on you never learning what a small green fern can do. Now you know. 4,000 years of Asian agriculture proved that soil can stay fertile forever. Not through chemistry, not through industry, through a living partnership between farmers and an organism smaller than a leaf. The knowledge survived. The fern survived. The question is whether we will use them. The soil is dying. The climate is changing. The system we built is failing. And floating on forgotten ponds around the world, the answer waits. It has always been waiting. And that is where tonight's vault closes. If this changed how you see a fern you never knew existed, subscribe. Share this with someone who cares about soil, about farming, about the things we were never supposed to learn. The vault will open again soon. Until then, look closer at what grows in still water. The answers are often hiding where no one thinks to look.